Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com. Welcome to Techlandia, a podcast about and for the technology industry, a place to learn, connect, and engage with leaders and thinkers involved in the technology industry. You can check us out at techoregon.org, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's podcast series. My name's Skip Newberry, and I'm president and CEO of TAO. And with us, we're excited to have as our guest today, Zeke Camusio. Zeke, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, like most of these episodes, I typically like to start off by asking our guests to share a little bit about their own professional journey. And I'm wondering if you could do the same, just kind of take us through and up to present day and maybe share a little bit about the company you're with now.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm one of those, I guess you could call me a serial entrepreneur, but I never had a traditional job. So I had my first startup in high school. I was really fascinated by the early days of the internet. So I was like looking for anything I could find to sell online. Um, some were successes, some were failures, but I learned a lot in the early days. I then had a marketing agency in Portland, Oregon, 2007, I think that's when it started. And that was acquired in 2015. That was an amazing way to work with a lot of different brands and get an insider scoop in terms of, what was working for in terms of channels, but also like what was working for some industries and not others, and what was it that made some businesses successful and not others. So I always refer to that as the uh, best MBA anybody could have, because I got to see essentially some patterns in terms of what made some companies very, very successful. When that got acquired, I started doing consulting. So my background is in economics and statistics. So I gravitated towards analytics and helping companies make data-driven decisions. What um, what happened in those days was that I found that for every hour that I was spending consulting with clients, I was spending 4 hours preparing all the data and analyzing patterns and being able to provide those insights. And I realized that it didn't make sense to do 5 hours of work and only bill for one of them. So at that point, I had started working with machine learning and AI, and I built a system for myself that would essentially help me scan millions of different data points and provide me with the insights so I could be ready for a call within 10 minutes. So it didn't eliminate me, but I talk about it as getting me superpowers. So that was, really a really great lesson in figuring out what it is that I do as an analyst and how can I get machines to learn to do the same. And then what happened is I showed that to a couple of marketing teams, and they just wanted to get their hands on it. So even though I wasn't planning on that being a business, very quickly I realized that there was a need that was beyond what I needed. Um, and that was the inception of Data Speaks. So um, that was about 4 years ago. And it's been a wild ride since then, figuring out every aspect of AI and machine learning. But essentially, we help marketing teams get the most from their advertising. So in the US, brands spend about 54% of their marketing budgets in advertising. And what we do is we provide attribution data. So we help them understand what channels and campaigns drive revenue so they can invest in the right marketing strategies.
And what are some of the like latest pain points that you're seeing among marketing teams right now? How are they adjusting to this world of, generative AI solutions? What does that look like in terms of what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a mix of people that are early adopters and people that are just kind of waiting to see whether this is something that is going to stay or just if something that's going to fade away. Obviously, it's going to stay just like the internet did, and my prediction is that it's actually going to be much more impactful. Because the internet gave us the ability to essentially connect with anybody in the world, but AI just makes it so you can access anything that is online within seconds. So I think that that's gonna just create so many new startups. So what I'm seeing among our clients is using AI for their own internal processes with a human in the loop. So that could be, for example, writing a blog post that then they edit themselves, or maybe generating an image for a post, all the way to getting more efficient with their workflows. So maybe you don't have to write a proposal each time. You have a document that guides the proposal project. So if it can connect to your pricing and terms of service, and information about the different services that you provide, an AI system can take all that, put together a proposal that is maybe 95% ready, and then you as a human polish the last details.
That's great. I mean, I think one thing we're seeing across a lot of different roles and functions is there's a mix of like excitement around the prospect of what AI can do, but then there's also some trepidation around, okay, is this thing going to ultimately replace me? It sounds like what you're saying is that you're seeing very much a sort of human in the loop approach, being the one that's the most effective going forward. Is that right?
Yes, I think it's important to keep in mind that the skill set the machines have is very different from our skill set as humans. We can connect with people in ways that machines can't. We understand the subtleties of what it takes to communicate with clients. We can have context that is really important in terms of figuring out, you know out of the 10 recommendations that the AI is giving me, which ones fit my business strategy and which ones are just not right for me. And I think that just like any new technology it's going to disrupt the way we do things. We don't have to see this disruption as something inherently negative. So yeah, it's going to change the way we do things, but that can mean that it can enhance our ability to do more with less time, just be much more resourceful. Potentially, I think that the most exciting application is uh, automating a lot of the things that are not really fun, and
Right.
getting to work on the things that are creative and have to do with strategy. And I think that that's a really good distinction, because even with my own team, we have salespeople, we have product people, and there are some questions that ChatGPT, for example, can answer very well because the data already exists out there. But there are other questions that it really depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So I think that that's where I see a lot of exciting opportunities where AI can do the stuff that we would normally delegate to maybe an entry level employee, and we still get to do the stuff that excites us and makes us want to go to work.
hmm hmm And I'm wondering, in what ways are you and your team leveraging AI solutions to effectively, deliver greater insights faster to some of your customers? I'm wondering if you could kind of walk through kind of a typical customer engagement.
Of course, yeah. So there are two aspects to this. So one of them is we use machine learning, which is a subset of AI, to figure out attribution. So what happens is, uh, companies have, say, 10 different marketing initiatives. So they could advertise on Google Facebook, TikTok. They're sending emails, text messages. They're posting to social media. They're doing trade shows and so on. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the outcomes. So you have 1,000 conversions, $1 million in revenue, and we had to figure out how much of that revenue we can then map out to each of the activities. And that's something that the approach that marketers have taken over the last few years was to put a pixel on a website and hope for that pixel to tell you the truth. So maybe you put a Facebook pixel, and the problem with that is, well, third-party pixels are blocked about half the time by ad blockers and privacy settings. But you also have the issue that you have all these pixels that don't really talk to each other. They don't have access to your source of truth. They don't understand how consumers interact with multiple channels. So um, they're essentially reporting exposure to ads, and not has they have nothing to do with impact. So that's a huge issue, because more than half of the marketing budgets in the United States for consumer brands are spent on ads that marketers can't evaluate. So that's a huge aspect of what we do. Then on top of that, we have an AI layer, and it has three aspects to it. So the one that is fully functioning at the moment is the ability to just ask questions to your data. So why did my sales drop last month? What are my most effective marketing campaigns on Facebook, and so on. The next two that we're working on, one we have in early access, is essentially, we call it promptless AI. But what it is not only do you want AI to answer questions for you, but you want it to tell you about stuff that you are not asking about. So that is, in our case, we found that the average brand has 12 different data sources. All these sources are telling a different story, and you have 1 million data points every day, which is way more than any human has time to understand. So AI is very, very good at identifying patterns, looking for, one example could be keywords with high conversion rate that are showing not in the first 5 results. So that's one of the 150 queries that we have at the moment. But you can add more as a user, and that's essentially anything that a human could potentially look for, but nobody has the time to look for all of it on a daily basis. So we're really excited to be putting this in the hands of customers, getting feedback, and soon enough, hopefully in the next month or two, is going to be available to the rest of the public. Stage 3, which is something that I'm really excited about, is giving AI the ability to perform actions. So that could be, download this as a CSV, add this report to my daily dashboard, notify my marketing agency about this campaign drop in performance. It could be post to the Slack channel, email somebody. So essentially, you would have access to a number of different tools, the tools that you already use every day, you're familiar with, but rather than having to, copy, paste, export, transform data, the AI system will just do it for you.
Nice. So in terms of the, type of customer mix that you're working with, how big are some of the types of companies you're engaging with? And then also, how would you characterize kind of the smaller ones that you're working with? What are the upper and lower bounds?
Yeah, the majority of our clients are consumer brands. We do work with some, business to business, or lead generation businesses, but the majority happen to be direct to consumer brands that sell in more than one place. So they have their website, they sell on Amazon. And in terms of revenue, most of them are in the 10 to 200 million range.
Mhm.
We do work with some clients that are, smaller than that. But essentially what happens, if we think about this, 54% of your budget goes into ads, the more you spend, the more you leave on the table. So the vast majority of our clients, with the insights that DataSpeaks provides, are able to increase the return on investment from their ads by 20%. So the more you spend on ads, the bigger the problem is, and the more important it is to solve it.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of companies that are doing direct to consumer, are there certain segments within that category that you're seeing kind of greater adoption in terms of use of technology? Like, who are the early adopters?
It's we happen to be very well represented in the fashion space, wellness space, but it's not limited to that. So the the elements that come into play when you have an e-commerce uh, presence are usually the same. You have products, you have marketing channels, you have a website, and it doesn't really matter what it is that you sell. That just happens to be, the kind of clients that have a pretty sophisticated media mix. So I think the reason we don't have as many lead gen or B2B clients is that most of them, they do trade shows or LinkedIn, so they have a more narrow mix of channels. But when you're selling to consumers, you essentially want to be on YouTube, TikTok, Google, Facebook, Bing, all of them. That just adds more complexity, which makes our insights more valuable.
Makes a lot of sense. So in the consumer space across your clients, what are you seeing as kind of the big trends right now in terms of changing either consumer sentiment or in terms of where consumers are spending their time? Like, if you were to advise a company to start looking at where things are headed, what would you say?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. So one of them is that Amazon is becoming stronger and stronger. So a lot of brands that were selling only direct to consumers through the website, they're just seeing that everybody else, all their competitors are going on Amazon and just capturing a lot of that market. So they kind of see themselves forced to making that move. In most cases, I would say that that's a very good move, because you're essentially going to where the consumers are. People go to Google for a lot of reasons, but people only go to Amazon to buy stuff. So
Right.
that's really a good thing to do. But we also see that, yeah, you lose a lot of control. So one of the things that happens is those are Amazon's customers. They're not your customers. You don't get their email address, phone number. You can't text them or email them. So rather than acquiring them once and then being able to reach them with low cost channels such as email, you have to pay per click for every single purchase. So that's a big problem, and you can't really announce new products or do promotions because they are not your customers. And what I also see is that a lot of our clients are just dealing with listings being reported or rejected, and a lot of those times are competitors doing that to them, or just like, just some shady stuff going on. And then you have to deal with, Amazon support, which is, very difficult to do. And that could put a big dent on your business if you go to Amazon and then some of your top products are being banned from being advertised. But I would say that generally speaking, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, but that's a very good move. The other thing to know is, I've been in digital marketing for the last 2 decades, and what happens with when platforms come to the market is, not a lot of advertisers are on them. So there's a lot less competition, which makes clicks and traffic a lot more affordable. And then as the platforms mature, those costs increase. So we've seen that with Google, for example. I remember being able to get clicks for a cent, then it was 5 cents, then it was 10 cents. And these days, it's very tough to get clicks for anything below 250 or $3. And then, when that happened, Facebook became a really good option. Then they acquired Instagram, and that was a very good return on investment. And then, the same thing happened to the point where it just kicked out a lot of advertisers because the numbers didn't work anymore. So we're seeing right now, TikTok is a great option. We're seeing fantastic return on investments. It's a whole different animal. You need, user generated content, but there are a lot of good things about that. So you can run ads from the accounts of the influencers rather than your own account as a brand. So that's always very, very effective. If you hire influencers to create content for you, and then they're the ones advertising. So if you're somebody following them, you're familiar with who they are, and you're not seeing ads from a brand you've never heard from before. Um, so um, yeah, and YouTube is still very, very a very good option for certain industries. So I would say that most of the time is very industry specific. And you have to think about, is this something that people need and search for, or is it something that people don't necessarily need, but has visual appeal? So maybe if they see it in social media, that would persuade them to purchase. So I think that's I provided some general trends, but at the same time, it's very dependent on what it is that you sell and who you sell it to.
Mhm. Yep. And it sounds like a big part of the services and value you offer to your customers is really helping them to better understand um, both where their ad spend is going and then what the likely return is on that. But part of that is also understanding their customer better. And I'm wondering, are you seeing some generational like what are some of the generational sort of differences that you're seeing across customer categories?
Yeah. So one of the things we're seeing is with I think younger consumers are I would say much more cynical and much more aware of all the tricks that advertisers might want to play on them. So they really value yeah, the opinion of influencers they follow. So whereas in the past we could say, hey, I'm a brand, this is my product, buy it. What I'm seeing more and more is that we have to engage uh, all these influencers that we can borrow credibility from, that can speak on our behalf, that already have established relationships with their followers, and that's a much more direct path than if I were to go straight to the consumers.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, and in effect, I mean, there's an element of having to give up some element of control there on the part of the brands, right?
Yeah, yeah, and same that happens with Amazon. I think that you know it's much more difficult to succeed as a consumer brand these days than it was, say, 5 years ago. And we talked about most of the reasons, but yeah, it's essentially, the being able to have access to very cheap traffic directly to your website, where you could make the numbers work pretty much every time. Now you have to be much, much more strategic and have access to much better tools to measure what's actually working and what isn't.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's something even in our little universe of association management, where during the early part of the pandemic, we saw a really interesting opportunity to leverage digital platforms much more readily in terms of how we engage our member companies and their employees. But there was a limited window; it closed quickly before it became just a lot of digital noise, and because everyone was moving online, right? Everyone was experimenting and perfecting how they use these tools, and now it seems like there's often a, um, a steeper curve or steeper barrier, if you will, for especially smaller businesses to be able to figure out how do you cut through the noise at scale, or do you not? Do you only focus on a very targeted approach? I'm wondering what you're seeing with some of the smaller companies that are a little more resource constrained within your customer base. What are some of the things that are working best for them in terms of strategy?
Yeah, so it really varies a lot across the board, but I think that the most useful thing that I can provide is a framework for finding out how this, what's going to work for you. So I think it's important to understand that the revenue and return on ad spend that these pixels that you're using are reporting are not even close to the truth. So we found that they're usually off by about 40%. Sometimes they report, over report 40%, sometimes they under report. So if they're telling you they made you $1,000, they could have made you 1,400 or 600. And that's a really big problem. So I think that's first and foremost, you want to have a reliable way to measure the actual return on investment that you can get for every additional dollar that you put into a given media. So that's first and foremost. Now, what is it that you want to analyze? So there are usually a couple of different things. So you have channels, you have campaigns, but also you have creative and audience. And you have to be very systematic about how you test against that. So for example, for us, we didn't know, going into business. We knew what companies we would be working with, but we didn't know, for example, if we should be reaching directly to the brands or talking to the agencies, the marketing agencies they use for their ads. We didn't know if we're talking to the brands, if should be talking to the CEO, CMO, head of analytics, head of media buying. And then there's the message, the value proposition, and how we capture their attention. So there are a lot of different things that we could say. We could use video, we could use text, we could use an image. The image could be a screenshot. It could be something that shows them making decisions, right? So all these things, are, we call them variables, and you have to start somewhere. You have to start with your intuition as a business owner or marketer in terms of what you think is going to happen, and then go from the top down and actually test the things. And we have a system in terms of how the different naming conventions that you can use, so you can then look at individual campaigns, for example, but also group all the video campaigns and all the text campaigns to see which of those two is doing better. You could also group all the, let's say, value proposition A, you talk about the product quality. Value proposition B, you talk about the cost savings. Two very different messages. So you have 5 different ads for each, but having the right naming convention allows you to look at data at the more granular level, but also to aggregate it. And I think that having a mindset of experimentation is huge, right? So we don't know, so there's so much we don't know, and the more we can accept that, the better off we're going to be.
Yep.
And we have a hypothesis, we put it to the test, we let the data speak, and we continue doing that. And the more we do it, the more we learn about what works or what doesn't work.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit and ask you, you've been in Portland a little while now, and wanted to get your thoughts on sort of the state of the local creative ecosystem, right? I mean, there's a lot of marketing talent here. There's some great consumer brands. What were some of the reasons why you decided to kind of launch your company here, and what are some of the things that you think are positive attributes of the local community that you're excited about as you look to the future?
Yeah, well, I've lived here for the last 15 years, so we and not everybody in our team is in Portland, so we have a remote work policy. And um, that said, I think Portland is a great place to be, and I found that the local community is always been, um, just very, very generous. So there are a lot of events, given how small Portland is compared to other metro areas. There are a lot of events, a lot of networking. People have always been very open with their knowledge, and I've always tried to pay back as much as possible. And yeah, in terms of the creative space, I think that the number of agencies per capita is probably the one of the highest that I've seen. So it's really a fantastic place to be, and certainly things in terms of in-person networking have slowed down since the pandemic, but I've also seen that it's picking up back again. So I'm excited to see that and be a part of that.
Awesome. And as we wrap up our time together, I'm wondering if there's any final words you'd like to leave our audience with.
I think that I'll say that the world is changing very rapidly. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you know, don't let that stop you. We don't control most of it. We just have to adapt, and it is a little nerve-wracking. That things are changing at a much rapid pace than we were used to historically. But we have to play the hand that we are dealt. And there are a lot of aspects of what we do that we just don't control, and we have to do the best with what we is actually under our influence. So don't let that discourage you. I know that a lot of people are feeling a little bit of that, but just know that you're not alone. We're all navigating this together, and if there's anything I can do to help, happy to sit down for a coffee or a Zoom, and uh, help in any way I can.
I appreciate it, Zeke. It's always great to catch up and appreciate what you do and all that you bring to the community as an individual. So thanks again for taking some time to spend with us today and telling us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Skip.